welcome back! In this episode, we take on Meall Dearg of Aonach Eagach, admire from a distance the narrowest ridgewalk in mainland Britain, and conclude our epic story of Glen Coe's creation with the attack of the Ice Ages. If you find yourself enjoying the show, feel free to like, subscribe and share, as this really helps the channel to grow, and that means more free content like this for you to enjoy. Meall Dearg is a 953 metre Munro located about a quarter of the way along Aonach Eagach from the eastern end, and presents to Glen Coe as the summit of a great serrated wall of rhyolite, if indeed it can be seen at all in Glen Coe's inclement weather. Most Munro baggers will tick off this peak as part of a traverse of Aonach Eagach, but Meall Dearg and Aonach Eagach are not the same thing. The ridge traverse is a sustained, dangerous scramble with crazy exposure that requires total commitment, while Meall Dearg can be summited exclusively on foot with zero exposure, on a route that also provides a spectacular bonus view of the Aonach Eagach pinnacles that you'll miss if you stay only on the ridge. Now let us be clear, Aonach Eagach is not a Munro. It's a ridge that contains two Munro summits, the other being Sgurr nan Fianna as we saw last time. In other words, there's no requirement for a Munro bagger to do the Aonach Eagach. Indeed, Hugh Munro and the first completist Reverend Archie Robertson didn't, and if the mere sight of it gives you a strong no feeling, the Glen Coe Mountain Rescue Team will thank you for not attempting to. Fatalities on the ridge are unfortunately not uncommon, and a qualified mountain guide is essential for those without experience of prolonged exposed scrambling. If you lose your bottle here, there is no escape route to safety other than the knife edge itself. Instead, we'll tackle Meall Dearg from Loch Leven, beginning at Coolsnacone and ascending parallel to the Alt Glen Coe into the beautiful Glen Coe itself. A very gradual ascent leads the walker to the Aonach Eagach, the far side of which the path, now best described as very patchy, climbs at a steeper angle beside the stream towards the plateau of the Bealach between Meall Dearg and the high Corbett, Garavan. Here the path all but disappears, and a couple of cairns aren't much help in telling you where to go either. Keep heading east towards the bumpy knolls at the bottom of Meall Dearg's north ridge until you see a prominent fence post appear on the far side of the plateau, and the line of the old fence will lead you directly up the ridge to the summit over a series of steps that, while loose steep terrain, doesn't present much difficulty in good weather. If the visibility is poor, acquiring the line of fence posts from the Bealach will be far more challenging, but compass bearings taken in advance will easily solve this problem. And we all know how to take a compass bearing, right? Right? In winter, as with any Munro, the route will be significantly more cumbersome, and what paths there are to speak of will be hidden under the snow. But that said, this isn't a particularly challenging Munro for a winter ascent. Of course, if you lack experience in winter, you'll need an experienced guide or companion, as on any Munro. For the avoidance of doubt, the winter traverse of Aonach Eagach is a highly technical alpine route that should only be attempted by highly experienced rock and ice climbers. Yo, what's happening, guys? Here we are at Coolsnacone, on the banks of Bonnie Loch Leven, and just up there you can see the pap of Glen Coe, and the ridge leading up to Sgurnampfianne. Obviously today we're here to do Meall Dearg, which lies just out of sight at the end of that ridge snaking up there, the skyline. To get to it, we're going to be following the Aonach Eagach up here. Basically the path, a scrappy path, runs up just from the roadside back down there. Opposite Coolsnacone, there's a camping and caravan site there. However, we shall make our way over the brow of this hill to get more of an idea of the quarry that we're going to be going up into. And then up onto the ridge for a bit more of an angled climb, it looks like. Yeah, up the back way to the top of Meall Dearg. Let's head on up there. Well, just coming over the brow of the hill there, you can see the route proper. We're going to be heading up there, that Bealach, and then up the skyline to Meall Dearg, the red rounded hill, though as we'll see, that's stretching that term to a fairly large extent. Now, down here you can see gorgeous Loch Leven, which is the reason that there's a bridge at Ballachulish. Otherwise you've got to go all the way along here to Kinloch Leven and then back around there if you want to follow the coastline. In the past it's saved a lot of time getting a boat over, as you would imagine. Well, the summit has appeared up there. You can see the top of Meall Dearg, and our path has been pretty scrappy and fairly boggy in places as well, so be warned. Quite a boggy approach, but obviously as we get higher that'll be less so. We'll get more stony moraine, and once of course we're up on the ridge we'll enter the montane section. So yeah, the bogs, once they're dealt with down here, they're out the way until you've got to go back over them on the return. Well, you can see the path has improved somewhat, become a lot more stony and more of a 4x4 track, leading up into, as you can see, the idyllic Glen Eagach. Now our path winds its way up on this hillside here up to the Bealach, We're still fairly low, maybe below about 230 metres, 240 metres. So yeah, once obviously we're up on the Bealach, the quote-unquote climb shall begin. Check it out. The teeth up there of Aonach Eagach have appeared. And spoiler alert, that's all we're going to be doing today, checking it out, at least in terms of my contribution to proceedings. I won't be going anywhere near that ridge, you know, not ashamed to say it, not my bag. If you are so inclined, well, I'm going to venture to say that there's one or two other videos on YouTube that might cover it in that way. However, we shall be providing a rather more casual guide, as well as beautiful surroundings, but yeah. Onward to the Bealach. Well, as you can see, the ragged edge has revealed itself almost in full. Yeah, nice alternative view of it. We've seen it plenty of times, from the Glen Coe side of course, but yeah. Quite a different shape and character, as you can see, from the north side. It even gives a little bit of a feel of the Cuillin on Skye, because this is the narrowest walkable ridge on the UK mainland. And of course in winter it's an alpine challenge. As for us, we're going to be heading to the rounded hill, Meall Dearg, Red Hill, just there at its left hand or eastern end. So yeah, as you can see, we're making progress up towards the Bealach. So yeah, shouldn't be too long and we'll be up onto the north ridge of Meall Dearg itself. See you up there. Well, here we are, having just crossed the Aonach Eagach, and going to start making our way up the right hand side of it here, up towards the Bealach. As you can see, some dramatic sight to our right. Our ascent route is the last chance to escape from the Aonach Eagach traverse before its most sustained challenge begins. This section, from Meall Dearg to Stop Courlay, is referred to as the Crazy Pinnacles, and we can't disagree. This row of shark's teeth is unavoidable. There is no bypass path around the pinnacles and, as mentioned, no escape route, so you need to quite literally climb over them in a situation of tremendous exposure. If you're already a way along the ridge, retreat may be just as intimidating as continuing. This is where Aonach Eagach gets its name. The notched or serrated ridge and the handwork and exposure are sustained until a steep pull up to Stop Courlay. Many scramblers consider this section a hard grade too, especially in less than clement weather, which, as we know, is generally the case in Glen Coe. The likelihood of becoming cragfast is highest in this section, so again, only attempt this if you have experience of very airy handwork. For those interested in a responsible attempt on this undeniably spectacular ridge traverse, we highly recommend Andrew Dempster's classic mountain scrambles in Scotland and the SMC's Highland Scramble South, We would also strongly recommend professional guides such as Walk Glen Coe and Wild Venture Scotland, who are both friendly, down to earth, and will get you where you want to go with no fuss. Links to these books and services are available in the video description. Well, here we are upon the Bealach, and our path snakes up into the rocky knolls up there, and basically up the steps to the top. Well, here we are amongst the rocky knolls, and the path up here is pretty faint. Pretty faint. It's, yeah. If it was snowbound, well, you'd be getting your map and compass out. As it is, it's just about easy enough to follow. I'm going to bash on up here to what looks like a series of interminable false summits. Well, here's the hard part coming up. Stop at about 640 metres now, I think. Not far to go. But yeah, it's basically a case of following the fence posts up from down there, up here. And as you can see, they go on and eventually make their way up right to the top of Meall Dearg. Let's smash it. Well, here we are at about 725 metres. You can see Blackwater Reservoir out there, and over there you can see the Ben Nevis. And it's brutal northeast buttress there. Well, here we are at about 850 metres, 100 to go. And, look what I can spy. The Buchillia at the head of Glen Coe there. Lovely light, as you can see on the Ring of Stale over there. As for us, I'm gonna keep following these fence posts. Hopefully over this brow we'll get an idea of how far horizontally we've got to get to the top, but I've got a feeling it's not very far. Well, here we are at what's hopefully the summit boulder field, or the penultimate one at least. There's been a few false summits, as I mentioned. However, look at that! Beautiful angle on the business end of the Aonach Eagach there. Yeah, boy! Just a hop, skip and a jump up to the summit. And you can see why it's called Meall Dearg, because it wouldn't be much use, although it does happen, calling a mountain the Rounded Mountain when it's surrounded by similarly rounded mountains. So usually it's in comparison to the surrounding peaks, and obviously this is a prime example, given it's the only rounded hill really in the vicinity. So yeah, let's head on up there. Well, over there you can see what many consider the scariest or most intimidating part of the Aonach Eagach, that being the nightmarish, to me at least, looking descent from Voyage, which is at the start the first challenge, and arguably, as I say, the most daunting, because from the easterly direction you can't see where you're climbing down to. I mean, it looks okay from here, right? But yeah, if you're descending from the top of Voyage, it basically feels like you're about to down climb very quickly all the way down to Aonach. Yeah, very much outside my comfort zone, but hey, I'm sure there's plenty of you out there viewing the show who've done it, and some who've even found it a piece of cake and wanted it to be harder. Well, good for you. Different strokes for different folks, as they say. And we're now on about the final 20 metres up to the summit. A nice bit of sun out there on some of Scotland's most popular peaks. Not bad, eh? Marvellous diorama in the Tolkien-esque Lochaber peaks. Onward to the summit. Well, here we are. And what's that I spy over there? The big beast of Glen Coe, Bitian Nambian. And looking up here, it is indeed the summit. And this one is all about location, location, location. Back in King of the Hill, we looked at the forging of Glen Coe in the fires of volcanism, when the great cauldron collapses of Glen Coe and Ben Nevis saw unimaginable explosions and the volume of around 12 Munros blown into the air over millions of years. The cataclysmic violence and destruction of the volcanic era ended around 400 million years ago, after which the Earth very gradually began to cool. Over hundreds of millions of years, the volcanic rock of the Caledonian mountain range was mostly worn down by wind and rain until only volcanic remnants like Glen Coe and Ben Nevis, sites of the Great Cauldron subsidences, survived. But the landscape we see today in the Western Highlands assumed its final form during the Quaternary period, specifically the Pleistocene epoch of 2 million years ago to around 11,000 years ago, more commonly known as the Great Ice Age. The Pleistocene era provided the final stage in the agony of creation in the form of one of nature's most powerful processes, glaciation. Over the last 2 million years, the Caledonian range became sealed in enormous sheets of ice. The thermal energy of the volcano had wrought solid rock with unimaginable ferocity, but even the explosive force of a collapsing magma chamber pales in comparison to the all-conquering power of ice, gravity, and time. Glaciation drastically alters a landscape on a far wider scale than any volcano can, given enough time. This is because compacted frozen water in large volumes is very heavy and, when set in motion, has phenomenal erosive power. The glaciers scour the underlying bedrock, plucking up boulders the size of houses as they slowly grind across the terrain and depositing them far from their original location. Most of the highlands were covered in glaciers for the last 2 million years, with occasional thaws. Each glacial episode, however, erased much of those before it, so we can only meaningfully speculate on the last ice ages that occurred in the more recent past, that is 29,000 to 11,000 years ago. Around 20,000 years ago, Scotland would have looked more like Greenland. The global temperature was around 5 degrees lower than now, which might sound a small number, but as we unfortunately know all too well, even a single degree change can have dramatic consequences for the planet. Upon the summits of the Caledonian mountain range, conditions would have been more akin to the Antarctic. Lower down, woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant deer, and enormous bisons would have dominated the icy plains, stalked by mountain lions, wolves, bears, and even a species of hyena. An enormous ice sheet at least a kilometre thick would have covered the plateau of Aonach Eagach, from which glaciers ran out westward, gouging and steepening valleys such as Glen Coe, Glen Nevis and Loch Leven. The ice smoothed rocky outcrops into smooth whalebacks and exposed the ancient igneous rock of the primordial Glen Coe magma chamber. The geological evidence shows that the glaciers were higher than the summit of Buachel Yet of Moor and the ridge of Aonach Eagach. We can determine this by the presence of glacial striae, that is, grooves where rock as hard as or harder than the surface stone has been picked up by the glacier and scraped against the surfaces across which the glacier travels. There are many such striae above 900 metres in Glen Coe. The real giveaway, however, is the abundance of glacial erratics on the Glen Coe summits, that is, boulders and stones carried far from their point of origin by the glaciers and deposited upon the high peaks as the glaciers melted. Around 18,000 years ago, the glaciers began to diminish as the Scottish climate warmed, and many may have completely disappeared. This warm spell lasted around 5,000 years before another frozen eon began around 13,000 years ago. This lasted until around 11,000 years ago and was the last ice age before the Common Era. Again, Aonach Eagach was capped with a 1,000-metre thick ice sheet, and again the glaciers wrought their legacy upon the mountainsides as they flowed down the glens. This time, however, the glaciers were only around 600 metres thick, so many peaks in Loch Aber would have remained above the ice. In the high corries, subsidiary glaciers sculpted the intricate ridges of the Three Sisters and the lower ramparts of Aonach Eagach. Upon the mountain peaks, the freeze-thaw cycle that we learned about in Heart of Kinglass meant water and cracks in the rock gradually pried them apart into loose angular blocks, creating the shattered appearance of the high crags and producing the boulder fields of which we often encounter on or below the Munros summit, like that of Meall Dearg. This final period of glaciation lasted only a few thousand years, and it's estimated that the glaciers had entirely disappeared by around 11,500 years ago. They left behind enormous glacial moraines, that is, great mounds of deposited rocks and boulders in the glens and mountainsides, and end moraines at the mouths of corries and U-shaped valleys, such as the Glen Coe end of the Ladig Garten. As we know, many Munro routes begin among now grass-covered hummocks that owe their existence to the great glaciers of the last ice age. The crushing weight of thousands of years worth of ice bearing down on the surface meant that the Earth's crust had been forced downwards, creating a depression around Rannoch Moor. As the meltwater caused the sea levels to rise, so too did the removal of the heavy ice cause the land itself to rise. A very, very slow motion equivalent of a person getting up from a soft chair or sofa. The imprint gradually returns to relative flatness. As sea levels and land levels gradually reached equilibrium, some coastlines were left as much as 8 metres above the sea level, and we see the effect of this in raised beaches along Loch Leven and Linney. A particularly useful example is that between Glen Coe and Ballachulish, over which the A82 now runs. After the ice, streams, rivers and rockfalls as a result of freeze-thaw processes created the landscape that's now familiar to us. One of the largest rockfall events in UK history was at the mouth of Corrigavel, where the natural dam of fallen rocks then blocked the passage of smaller stones being carried by the stream, which then backed up, and gravity created the flat floor at the entrance to the valley that we know today. Indeed, Corrigavel is a textbook hanging valley that the glacier would have left U-shaped. Its current V-shape further up is the result of 13,000 years of erosion by the Alp Corrigavel. Glacial meltwater carried huge amounts of loose rock, which gradually widened out fault lines and dikes to form deep gullies, like the meeting of the Three Waters. Moss and lichen then began to cover the landscape, with the mountainsides mostly bare. As the millennia passed, birch woods began to spring up, eventually joined by hazel, oak and pine, the glorious natural woodlands of the ancient Caledonian forests. For more details on the geological processes described, check out episode 5 of series 2, Heart of Kinglass. Thanks so much for your time. If you found this video useful, feel free to share it with people who you think would find it interesting. And as always, smash that like button if you haven't already, and hit subscribe so that you'll always see new videos on the day of their arrival. Next time, we'll round off the Glen Coe Munros with the hidden treasure of Scornahule. Until then, enjoy your adventures.